Hello and welcome to part 1 of our 4-part series on the Agile Manifesto for Business Analysts. In this video we'll be exploring what the first statement in the manifesto means, that's individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and then we'll talk about how this affects the day-to-day life of a business analyst. Before we go anywhere, I'd like to take a moment to explain the reason for this video. You probably heard of the annual State of Agile report that version 1 presents every year. It's a survey that attempts to identify trends in the Agile community. Well, in 2013, the report demonstrated that when asked who was the most knowledgeable about Agile in their organization, business analysts came out at the bottom. Even the executives, yes, the executives, came out above us. So let's do something about that, shall we? The best place to start learning about Agile project management and Agile development practices is the manifesto. The manifesto is not actually where it all started, though, as some people state. People like Jeff Sutherland and Kent Beck had been investigating lightweight methods for a while before the manifesto was written and signed. In fact, the term Scrum was first coined by a Japanese research team in the 80s. However, the manifesto is the foundation on which Agile techniques and Agile frameworks are based, and it's the most important place to start to really understand. The manifesto is 4 statements, supported by 12 principles. This video will focus on the first statement, as I said earlier, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools communicates Agile's emphasis on teamwork and teams that organize and plan their work together. It's intended, I think, to contrast the heavyweight processes that were being developed and rolled out at the time that the manifesto was written. I'm talking about processes like the rational unified process and other waterfall-like processes that are often referred to as plan-driven processes because they emphasize developing detailed plans specifying roles, activities, and deliverables up front, before or as the project got started. It's important at this point to remember that the last statement in the manifesto, that is, while there is value in the terms on the right, we value the terms on the left more. Processes and tools are valuable in Agile, don't get me wrong. Scrum, probably the most well-known Agile framework, is really a process that defines roles and activities. No, Kanban doesn't, however. Most Agile proponents will agree that becoming Agile almost requires tools, such as those that are used to automate testing and continuous integration. The key is to ensure that your process and your tools are valuable and that they're not reducing your team's ability to adapt or to communicate or to self-organize as it needs to. Good processes provide structure so that new people joining a team can quickly ramp up. They ensure that key regulations are being followed if that's appropriate for your product or for your industry. They enable you to see progress is being made and quickly identifying when it isn't and hopefully help you identify why it isn't. Good processes also create ceremonies or activities that encourage collaboration and creativity rather than limit them. And this is why the Agile Manifesto emphasizes individuals and interactions rather than processes and tools. Rather than try to define the roles and responsibilities for projects up front, Agile recommends that you allow teams to define them for themselves. Agile frameworks are intended to create environments where the people who know the work the best identify the tasks required and the time needed to complete them. The frameworks foster teamwork and self-organization, and they also encourage communication. Ed Catmull, the founder of Pixar, in my opinion, described this the best in his book Creativity Inc. Creativity Inc. is not a book, an Agile book, by the way. It's just a book about how Pixar is so successful. And what Ed Catmull says in this book is, a company's communication structure should not mirror its organizational structure. Instead, the processes and tools you use should open communication paths, not attempt to predefine them or restrict them. Your team should have access to the people they need when they need them, and that includes each other. Teams should also have the ability and authority to organize their work as they need to, enabling them to better adapt to change and to better adapt to when they come up with their own ideas. So what does this all mean for a business analyst? Well, if you're an analyst assigned to a team, your work is going to be much less structured than in a traditional development environment. In a plan-driven project that's adhering to a waterfall methodology or rationally defined process or something of the like, you'd have documentation that in some amount of detail describes what your role and responsibilities is, what your roles and responsibilities are. You'll have a detailed project plan indicating what deliverables they'll do and what date they need to be delivered by, and that plan will describe this months in advance. You'll also be describing the requirements for the entire project at the outset, or attempting to anyway. In an Agile setting, on the other hand, following an iterative and incremental approach, you'll still have a plan. That plan will be more detailed in the short term and more open in the long term. Each iteration, in Scrum they're called sprints, which might be 2 weeks long, might be 3 or 4 weeks long, but in each of these iterations you'll make something of a plan for your activities for that period and the deliverables for that period. And then every day you'll meet with your team to update or modify that plan based on your team's progress and feedback and other things that have come up in the last 24 hours. The second area where individuals' interactions really affects the work of a business analyst is in the way you interact with your users, your customers, and your other stakeholders. In a traditional plan-driven approach, you usually conduct most of your meetings with the customers in the analysis phase. And then in the construction phase, you start talking to the developers. And then in the testing phase, you talk to the QA. In most cases, these interactions all occur separately. When working under an Agile framework, you'll be working on a much smaller piece at a time. And you'll work with many groups at the same time. Agile leverages interactions between people, remember. So you want your workshops and your meetings to include representation from development, QA, and customers for each meeting. And these meetings should be happening regularly, if not every day, throughout the entire project. Also, instead of the document review cycles you may be all too familiar with, customers will be evaluating and providing feedback on the working software. So now you're probably wondering, but when do I build my requirements documentation? How do I get approval on the documentation if the plan keeps changing? How do I build traceability matrices? How can I possibly maintain a traceability matrix when everything keeps changing all the time? Well, that is the subject of the next video, which covers the second statement in the manifesto, working software over comprehensive documentation. I hope to see you there.